Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us this afternoon to this CCI and Mazar event. Today, we are really glad to welcome Dr. Julie Loliza, Managing Partner, Mainland China of Mazar, who is going to make a presentation on the tax preference policies in Shanghai and in China under the COVID-19. Julie, thank you for accepting our invitation today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alexandre. So, good afternoon, everyone, and seminar. Similar to the tax preference in Shanghai, and also, we will talk about the preference policy in China under the COVID-19, which means that we will really focus on the preference policy and all the subsidies, allow in Shanghai and also in China. So I will start the presentation. So please do not hesitate to send your questions through the chat, if any. I will try to make the presentation under, I would say, 30 to 40 minutes, and that will allow us, to reply to your questions. So as I mentioned, we will discuss about the preference. I have, sorry, there's one issue on the slide. It's not moving. I will try to say it again. Okay, now it's on. So we are going to talk about the tax preference policy. That tax preference policy applicable in Shanghai, also applicable in China. And the second part of this presentation will be focused on the subsidy policy, applied in Shanghai. So if we start on the tax preference, in fact, the tax preference applied in Shanghai is really since because of the lockdown. So there's many tax monthly filings, such as VAT, IIT or CIT. Those filings, which could be a monthly filing or quarterly filing, that filing deadline will be extended to June 30, which means tomorrow. So for those taxpayers that, who are not able to file or to send the tax filing by tomorrow, then you can ask or request an extension, deadline extension. You need to do that before, or at the latest tomorrow, which means June 30. So for those tax declarations are related to March, normally for March, you should make the declaration in April. And in April, you should make the declaration in May. And in May, you should make the declaration in June. So those 3 months extension, because of the lockdown, you can extend that, the deadline, those deadlines, to June 30. That's it. The first, preference. The second tax preference applicable in Shanghai is related to the corporate income tax. Same for those, normally the tax filing deadline for annual corporate income tax 2021, it will be extended to tomorrow, June 30. Same as VAT, IIT. You can ask for or request for an extension of the deadline, but you need to make this request before or at the latest tomorrow. For those, for example, for those companies who who has the headquarters in Shanghai and who has some branch companies in all the places, then those branch companies, because the Shanghai headquarters has not submitted the corporate income tax declaration, which means that the branch, they cannot submit neither. So for those branch, they also need to make, I would say, an extension of the deadline in their local authorities, not in Shanghai, but in their local authorities. And now we are going to get into the tax preference applicable in China. So for the tax preference applicable in China, that it's the, I would say, extension of deadline as well, or the portion of the deadline. So that this preference is related to the what we call medium-sized manufacturing enterprise. So that's what I mean, medium-sized manufacturing enterprise. Firstly, you need to be a manufacturing company, and this industry can be classified or should be classified in the national economy as manufacturing. That's the first condition. The second condition is the sales should be between 20 million and it should be between 20 million and 400 million. So when you have those two conditions, or you fill on these two conditions, then you are qualified as medium small manufacturing small and medium size enterprise. In that sense, you can, postpone for 6 months 50% of the payment of CIT, or corporate income tax, IIT, individual income tax, or the VAT, and all the related local surcharge tax. Which means, for example, that period is related to the last quarter, the fourth quarter of 2021, and the first and second quarters of 2022. Which means what? For example, you have, let's say, the fourth quarter, it could be, let's say, October, November, and December. Normally, for example, if you make a quarterly declaration, normally you should make the declaration, the fourth quarter, you should declare in January 2022, 15th of January 2022. So instead of the deadline, instead being 15th of January 2022, you can extend this deadline for 6 months, which means July 15, 2022, for the fourth quarter of 2021. The first quarter of 2022 extended 6 months, which means that, normally April 15, so you extend another 6 months, October 15, and for the second quarter, which means January 15 of 2023. And you can postpone that for 6 months, but not for the whole tax amount, only for 50% of the tax payment that you can postpone, okay? So this is exactly the same as the last one, but this one is applied to what we call small and micro manufacturing enterprise. So same, it's a manufacturing enterprise, but the annual sales is less than 20 million. And instead of postponing 50% of the tax payment, you can postpone 100% of the tax payment. Exactly the same as for the medium and small and medium-sized enterprise. You, instead of postponing only 50%, here you can postpone 100% of the tax payment for 6 months. Okay. Then we have what we call preferential policy for small-scale VAT taxpayer. So normally, those small companies, for those that their taxable income is less than 5 million, they can be qualified or have a status of small-scale taxpayers. So when they are in that situation, because of the COVID impact in China, from April, all the revenue related, from April 1st, 2022 to December, end of December this year, the VAT, the 3% of the output VAT will be exempted. I think, I don't know whether you are familiar with this. Normally, the small scale VAT taxpayer, it's related to very small company because those, revenue should be less than 5 million. And it's not the whole year. It's only from April 1st. It means the month following that we have the COVID impact in Shanghai. And it's only related to 9 months in year 2022, this year. And as those small taxpayers, instead of paying, for example, 6% as the service company or 13% for other companies, they pay an output VAT of 3%. So for those companies, their VAT will be exempted. It's not a postpone or whatever. It's really an exemption during 9 months on their revenue. Then we also have an extension of additional VAT deduction for certain services. So what are the services that we can have some additional VAT deduction? For example, if you are a company that at least the following services account for at least 50% of the total sales. So those services are postal services, telecommunication services, modern services such as research and development, cultural innovation. You can have also cultural and sports services, education and medical services, tourist and entertainment services, catering and accommodation services, or daily essential services, or order considered to be living services. In that case, you can have, for example, for the first 3 services, which means postal services, telecommunication, modern services, you can enjoy an additional input VAT of 10% deduction. And for the others, which are, from culture to order considered to be living services in that list, they can enjoy an additional input VAT of 15%. So what does it mean exactly? I am going to take an example. For example, for the first 3 services, postal, telecommunication, modern services, let's say you have, you sell a services for 100. Let's say your VAT is 6%. Okay, so for those 3 services, you can, your input VAT is 6%. So you can have, normally you can deduct 6 RMB to the output VAT. Instead of deduct 6%, you can deduct 6.6%, 6.6 RMB, which means that 10% of the 6 RMB, because you can deduct, I would say 1.1, it's 10% additional to the output VAT. For all the services, let's say if it's also 6 RMB, your input VAT, you can add, 6 point, you can deduct not 6, but 6 plus 15%. I hope that it's clear. If it's not clear, please send me the question, because we are not in a physical presentation, so it's a bit difficult to understand. And the following, it's also related to the VAT preference for transportation industry. Because of the COVID, and because of the COVID and zero COVID policy, the air transportation and railway transportation enterprise are very impacted by the COVID. So the government has decided that for the year 2022, all the branches or all the companies, they are conducting an activity of aviation or railway transportation enterprise. They can suspend the prepayment of VAT, and all their VAT related, all the output VAT, which means that the VAT that they need to pay on their sales related to the whole year of 2022 is exempted. Okay, so I can imagine that that is related to the space sectors or transportation sectors or whatever. That which means that what you need to keep in mind is the output VAT for the year 2022 for those sectors. They are completely exempt. Then we also have what we call the preferential VAT policy applied in China and applied to all the small and micro business. So, for example, what does it mean, the micro enterprise? Micro enterprise means that those enterprise, they have an annual taxable income less than 1 million. And the small enterprise, they are enterprise having this annual tax income less than 20 million. So for the first one, when you are considered as micro enterprise, which means revenue less than 1 million, if you have outstanding VAT credit starting from the tax return period in April 2022, then you can ask or request for a one-time refund, a completely refund of those outstanding credit VAT. Okay, so in the past, before the preferential policy applied, normally when you have an outstanding VAT credit, you cannot request for a refund. In fact, this credit will be, will be matching or pay for the next output VAT, next month output VAT, and next month output VAT, and the following month output VAT, and etc. So normally you cannot request for a refund of the outstanding VAT credit. Because of the impact of the COVID, I mean, the Chinese government allow you since this year, I mean, April 2022, you can request for a complete refund if you have an outstanding VAT credit. For the small enterprise, it's exactly the same. The small enterprise means that those revenue is less than 20 million, but instead of starting from April, it's starting from May. If in the May declaration you have an outstanding VAT credit, then you can request to a complete refund of the outstanding VAT credit. Okay. Then the following is, in fact, it's exactly the same, that for a larger or for medium-sized company and large size company. When we talk about the medium-sized enterprise, that's related to the taxable income less than 100 million. When you have an income less than 100 million, then it's considered as medium-sized enterprise. When you have an annual income over 100 million, it's considered as a large enterprise. So it's exactly the same for the micro and small enterprise. If you have an outstanding VAT credit from the tax return period in July for medium size, okay, then you can ask for a complete refund of the outstanding VAT credit. But you need to wait until the declaration of July. I mean, if you have this outstanding from June or from May, you cannot ask at this stage for the refund, but you need to wait until July. For a large enterprise, then you can ask for the refund from October this year, which means that even you have an outstanding credit, VAT credit, then you need to offset this VAT credit with the output VAT if in October you still have outstanding VAT credit, then you can ask for a complete refund of the VAT. Okay, then now you also have some credit refund for certain sectors. For example, for the sectors for which they are very impacted by the pandemic. For example, wholesale or retail. You have agriculture, you have accommodation and catering, you have home services, repair and order services, education, health and social work, culture, sport and entertainment. Those sectors are very impacted by the COVID. So the government allowed those companies who are conducting those activities in that sector to have what we call that to ask or to request for a refund of the VAT from the tax declaration period in July. So same as the previous one, instead of the size of the company is related to the sectors. In fact, it's mainly the sectors are for those who are very impacted by the COVID. From the declaration of July, if you still have an outstanding VAT credit, you can request for a refund. And we also have what we call some tax preferential tax preference, applicable to small and low profit enterprise. So what does it mean, the small and low profit enterprise? Normally, those enterprises, they should not have a taxable income exceeding 3 million. And also, the number of employees should not exceed 300, and their total assets does not exceed 15 million. If you are in such case, regardless, the activities, or regardless what we call the sectors, then in that case, if you make a profit, when those profits is, for the part that is not exceeding 1 million, then the corporate income tax rate is 2.5% instead of 25% or 15%. Okay, it's only 2.5%. And you also have, for example, if your profit is exceeding 1 million, for the exceeding part of 1 million, then the actual corporate income tax rate will be only 5%. So you have until 1 million of profit that you only need to pay for 2.5%, and for those exceeding 1 million, it's 5%. So, but you need to be qualified as a small and low profit enterprise. You also, we also have some preferential corporate income tax policy which apply to the technology-based small and medium-sized enterprise, TSME. So what is TSME? Firstly, they need to be resident enterprise registered in China, which means that the enterprise need to be incorporated in China, excluding Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan. And the second condition is you need to have a headcount which is less than 500 people. The annual sales is less than 200 million, and the total asset is less than 200 million. And of course, those, products or services should not be considered as prohibition or restricted by the state. So in that sense, if you have some research and development, and those research and development have been capitalized as intangible assets and include in the P&L, in the profit and loss account, in that case, and in the on the corporate income tax calculation, you can consider, you can deduct 100% of the research and development expenses before, to deduct those expenses from the taxable income as the basis of the deduction. I take an example. For example, I make a profit of 1,000, and this year, during this year, I have made an investment in the research and development of 100. This 100, I have capitalized in what we call in the balance sheet, because as intangible assets that I depreciate, let's say, within 5 years. Every year I deduct from my taxable income 20, right? In fact, in that regulation, if you are in the category of TSME, then you can deduct from the taxable income 100 instead of only 20. Okay, you can deduct 100 from your taxable income. So, which means that because my profit is 1,000, instead of reducing or to deduct only 20, I will deduct 100. So I will pay the corporate income tax on 900 instead of 980. Okay, and if the intangible assets they are completely recorded in the balance sheet, I can also, apply accelerate amortization to 200% of the cost of the intangible assets from January from this year. From January to let me check this. From this year, I have a problem on from January 1st this year. In fact, I have a problem with my screen, so I cannot see the whole screen. Sorry, I'm going to come back on the whole screen. Okay. Is it okay for you at the moment? Can you?
It's fine like this. Yeah, can see it full. You can keep going like this if you want.
Yeah. Maybe I need to keep like this, because otherwise, one
Understood.
part of the information is hidden. So, okay. If I'm coming back on, I think if the intangible assets are formed and they shall be amortized before tax at 200% of the cost of the intangible assets from January 1st, 2022, which means that, as I mentioned, if you would like to, amortize your intangible assets, in that case, you can make an acceleration of 2 times the amortization. For example, as the example that we take for 100 of R&D, then if you amortize within 5 years, normally every year you should deduct from the taxable income of 20. In that case, you can also choose to make an accelerate amortization, which is 2 times of the actual depreciation. In our case, it's 40. Okay, so you can deduct from your taxable income 40 instead of 20. Okay. moving. Okay, so, and for the following, it's also for the whole mainland China, you have what we call a preferential corporate income tax. It's related to the investment of equipment. That is, you know, this is only applied to medium, small size companies. I would say, for example, medium, small, and micro enterprise, what we call MED, SME. So those companies, they are related to the company in the sectors of information transmission, construction, living and business services, but those companies need to have less than 2,000 employees, or their operating income is less than 1 billion, or the total assets are less than 1.2 billion, or they are in the real estate development and operation, with the operating income less than 2 billion, or the total assets less than 100 million. Or if you are not in those two categories of sectors, if you are in older industry that need to be less than 1,000 employees, or operating income less than 400 million. So once you are qualified as medium and small micro enterprise, in that case, during the year of 2022, during this year, if you make an investment for an equipment or for more than 5 million RMB, then in that case, you can claim, you can claim 100%. You can completely expand the 5 million or more than 5 million RMB investment if the equipment should be depreciated less than 3 years. So I take an example. Let's say you buy a machine for 5 million, and this machine, fiscally speaking, you can make a depreciation within 3 years. So instead of making a depreciation of 3 years, that you divided this investment in 3 years, you can completely, expense it, to deduct from your taxable income, completely expensive. And if this machine, fiscally speaking, you can only depreciate between 4, 5, or 10 years, which means that more than 4 years, in that case, you can only expense it 50%, and for the other 50%, you need to depreciate either in 4 years, either in 5 years, or 6 years, or until 10 years, up to your choice, okay? So, same example, let's say we make an investment of 5 million. If this machine, fiscally speaking, you can only depreciate that within 5 years. In that case, you can only expense it, which means that deduct from the taxable income for 50%, 2.5 million only. This is the maximum that you can deduct from your taxable income. For the remaining 2.5 million, then you need to make a depreciation of 5 years. Okay? And then what is important to mention is that if you make this expense, for example, for the first case, for the first example, 5 million, and the company becomes a taxable losses, then this loss can be carried forward for 5 years. Okay, it's like all the tax loss, I mean, you can carry forward for 5 years. Okay, and so then for the next one, it's related to 6 tax and 2 fees. This tax preferential policy is only applicable for small and low profit enterprise or self-employed companies. So, you know, during 3 years, from January 1st this year to end of December 2024, during 3 years, those companies who are qualified as small and low profit enterprise. Small and low profit enterprise, we have defined that, you know, in page 12. So you can come back to the page 12. Then in that case, you will enjoy what we call a deduction of 50% of the resource tax, urban construction and maintenance tax, property tax, urban and township land use tax, stamp duty, or farmland occupation tax, and also for the 2 fees, which means that education surcharge and the local education surcharge. You will only pay during the 3 years 50% of those tax. But you need to make you need to submit a fine to the local authorities, because the local authorities will be the people who have the competence to decide whether you are qualified as small and low profit enterprise, because those tax are related to the local authority tax. They fall into the competence of the local authority. So now we are going to get into the second part of this presentation, which are related to the subsidy policy. So we are going to talk about 3 kinds of subsidies. The first one is the rental subsidies. The second one is the post-allowance subsidies. And the last one is the training subsidies. So for the first one, you probably heard that, you know, for those qualified non-state-owned housing landlord or owners or management entities, which means that, let's say, if your office is located, or the building of your office is not a state-owned landlord, or they are a kind of a management entity, you know, whatever. Normally, I would say 99% of the, or 90% of the office building will fall into this category. Normally, if the landlord decided to give you some exemption, for example, if the landlord decided that they exempt your rental for April, May, or June, or from March to April, it's up to them to decide. It could be 1 month, it could be 2 months, or it could be 3 months. If they exempt the rental, then the government will give them a subsidy of 30% of their exemption. So I take an example. For example, your rental per month is, let's say, is 100,000. If your landlord decided that he will exempt you, your company, 1 month of rental, so which means that you do not need to pay the April rental, let's say, then the landlord can request to the Shanghai local authority for a subsidy of 30,000, which means that he still needs to support a loss of 70%. And so maybe you will wonder why the landlord will exempt the rental, because some of the companies say if they cannot pay the rental, and they said, well, we cannot pay the rental, and or we are going to seize the rental or whatever, then sometimes they can have a transaction or a decision that to exempt 1 or 2 months of rental. In that case, the landlord can apply for a subsidy up to 3 million, okay, on the of subsidy. For the and this 3 million is only applied in Shanghai, in the district of Shanghai, except Baoshan. Baoshan's district, they can, the government can subsidy up to 40% of the total rental. So it means that the landlord still needs to bear a cost of 60% exemption if they would like to exempt the rental for their clients. And the subsidies of Baoshan is capped to 4 million. The second subsidy is what we call post-allowance subsidy. This subsidy is applicable only for the following, sectors, to the following sectors. Firstly, catering, retail, tourism, transportation, transport and entertainment, accommodation, convention and exhibition, and any other difficult industries seriously affected by the COVID-19. So if you are in one of these sectors, you can apply for a one-time job stabilization subsidy of 600 RMB per headcount, but at the condition that firstly, the company has no layoff or very small number of layoffs since last year. The second condition is the number of urban workers who have paid the social insurance before the application is made. So, if no one of your employees, they are paying the social security, even you do not lay off the people, you cannot apply for this subsidy. The last one is the maximum subsidy for each enterprise will not exceed 3 million. So if you are in the catering, retail, tourism, transportation, for entertainment, accommodation, convention, and exhibition, then you can try to apply for a subsidy of 600 per person per headcount. The second one is if you have, you can apply for a one-time employment subsidy of 2,000 per headcount if you have, hire, you have signed a contract of, I would say, 1 year with either the employee has been registered as an employee for more than 3 months, or you have signed a contract, at least 1 year contract, with the 2022 college graduates in Shanghai, then you can apply for an employment subsidy of 2,000 RMB per employee that you are going to employ. So that is, of course, this is one time, what we call one-time employment subsidy. So it's only 2,000 per person that, or per employee that you are going to recruit them. And then the last one is not new, in fact. It do exist before the COVID-19. It's what we call the subsidies applicable or applied for training. So, I mean, if a company organize what we call a vocational training related to the main business of the company or the department that they belong to, in that case, you can apply for a subsidy of 600 RMB per person each time. But you cannot exceed 3 times subsidy per employee, at the condition that every single training, it needs to be at least a class of 24 hours, which means that 3 days, training. So if you offered a 3-day training, vocational training to your employees, and then in that case, you can apply for a subsidy of 600 per person. Then we can also apply for vocational skill improvement subsidy. So that, the level of subsidies is depend on the level of the skill improvement. For example, you have 1,500 per person for junior workers, it's level 5. Then you have 2,000 for intermediate workers, level 4. And then you have 2,500 for level 3 and 3,000 for technicians, level 2. And you also have 3,500 for senior technicians. And for those, vocational qualification certificate without distinction is 1,000 subsidy per person. So that are the subsidies and training that's applicable in Shanghai. So I think that that's it, and that's the end. So Alexander,
yes.
I don't know whether some questions.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. Yeah, we indeed have one question on the chat. So this is regarding the private owned office. The person is asking if it's possible to benefit from state subsidies as well, considering that the office is private owned with private landlord, and does if it can benefit from the subsidies, do you need to include the landlord in the procedure and have his consent or not?
In fact, are we talking about the subsidy related to the rental?
Yeah, I think it may be referring to one of your last slides. Yeah, with the private owned.
For example, it could be owned by a company or private owned, whatever. As far as say own building, in that case, of course, it's not you cannot the subsidies is given to the landlord. If the landlord, the rental, can apply, ask for that the subsidy is only % of exemption. I don't know whether I take an example. Rental is 1,000. You can negotiate with the landlord. Can you make exemption for me? To make 1 month exemption. In that case, the landlord is not you. The landlord will apply for, and the subsidy the maximum subsidy that he can receive is only 30,000, which means that 30% of the exemption that he give it to you. Okay, so this case I would say that it's quite wrong, because the landlord still needs to bear 70% of the loss. Okay, so it's not any subsidy. The company, to you, is not that. It's given to the landlord who decided to make an exemption for your rental. I don't know whether it's clear that it's not a subsidy given to you, to the company, but given to the landlord at the condition that he exempted you rental, that he still needs to pay 70% of the losses, because the maximum subsidy he can receive is only 30%. Okay?
Okay, thank you very much for your answer. I just want to remind all the participants online to not hesitate to ask the question on the chat. There is a very small one from another one asking if they can have the presentation, a copy of the presentation after the meeting.
Sure.
Okay.
Alexandre, you can send to all the participants. If
sure.
they want to.
Well noted. We will do so. We will share you by email all the replay video as well as the document. I'm just waiting maybe a few seconds if there is any further questions about the event. Otherwise, I guess we are done for today. Well, I wanted to thank you, Julie, a lot for sharing your insight today. And also thanks all the participants for joining us as well. We're looking forward to meet you soon to our future events, and we will come back to you by emails with the presentation of today. Thank you everyone again, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you to all, and thank you, Alexandre. Bye-bye.